it's a different topic. It's life safety. So we're talking about avoidance. I knew we were off on tangents, and that's fine because I'm really hoping we can do this many times over. We can talk about different topics in depth. But talking about avoidance, so what sort of information or skills should people have to assist them with avoiding violence?
I think there's very simple, obvious ones, which is sort of coming back to academia with routine activities theories, which is avoiding bad places, where bad people hang out. There's all of that nice trite talk. But really, when I teach a sort of 5-phase model of violence, of how predatory individuals work, there's 2 kind of phases where you sort of get that chance to be aware. One of those is after the victim selection phase, where the person or persons are carrying out some form of surveillance on you. So, if we go back to those groups that you're talking about who have targeted individuals, at some point after kind of collectively identifying that this is a victim, they will have carried out some form of surveillance. And people always think of surveillance as happening over an elongated period of time. It might be a couple of seconds, but there's 2 things that they'll probably do. One of which is target glancing, and the other which is scanning. So target glancing is when people can kind of take furtive looks at you. They don't want you to know that they're interested in you, so they try and hide it, but they're trying to assess and weigh up. And often what will happen as well in groups is they'll glance amongst themselves and glance at you. So if you have a chance to tie in and identify those kind of behaviors, you have an understanding now that somebody has an interest in you. The other one we see, which is scanning, which can be people looking around to see whether they're witnesses or checking escape routes. And the final phase is the synchronization of movement. If somebody wants to attack you, somewhere along the line, they've got to move themselves into a position where they can attack you. So I kind of talk about 4 types, which is kind of basic approach, interception, where they try and cut across your path, following you, i.e. walking behind you, or waiting for you if they know where you're going to be. So I look on those kind of sort of 2 phases, the surveillance phase and the synchronization of movement phase, as things that I can be aware of, things that I can pick up and notice. Going to prior phases is understanding things like the location that you're in. What are the attractors or generators? So is it a location that's going to generate crime? Is a particular type of criminal going to be attracted to that location? So a couple of years back, we had an attempted abduction of a 15-year-old girl. And everybody was going, I'm really surprised that it happened at sort of like 3 p.m. broad daylight in a public place, which was a shopping mall. But if you're a predator looking for 15-year-old girls, where are you going to go?
You're not going to go behind a nightclub at 3 a.m., are you?
Right, exactly. So if that's the particular target you're after, you're going to go where that target is available to you. So if you understand that type of location, and if I'm teaching in Boston, I'll talk about the different metro stops which have the high kind of instance of crime, and the majority of them are not the city center ones, but the end of line stops on the metro, where basically it's an interchange between the train and parking lots, because you've got like that ready supply and constant supply of new victims. So when we start to understand the locations that attract criminals, pardon me, or generate crime, we can be a wee bit more aware when we're in them and start identifying those things, such as scanning, target glancing, and people's movement in relation to us. And that's all before we even get down to kind of the interview phase, where somebody might confront us with some form of ambush tactic.
Yeah, I think that's so critical, and I'm so glad you touched on that, understanding where violence happens, because that's the easiest way to avoid it, because you're not even in the situation. I think. Right. Look, I think that the self-defense industry has made great leaps forward in the past, well, let's say 20 years. In that there's more and more people teaching pre-contact and post-contact.
Yes.
But again, people seem to assume now that pre-contact starts at the interview. And at the interview, it's still 50-50 whether you're going to, unless you are an exceptionally good talker and you're dealing with someone who's socially motivated, not someone who's predatorily motivated.
Yes.
uh, the interview is still not a guarantee. just because
No,
you've read verbal judo, or just because you think you're pretty handy at talking under pressure. Let's see how well you do that when your heart rate's at 180 beats per
oh,
minute. By the way,
absolutely.
talking's a fine motor skill, but
Yes.
I think if we can teach people to avoid even being in the interview, that's
Yes.
that's by far by far superior than talking, teaching people how to keep their hands up and adopt a passive stance and talk their
Absolutely.
way out.